Coco. Now, a ruling by the European Court of Justice means if you fall sick while you're on holiday, you should be able to claim the time back from your employer. The government has said the ruling will apply from October, although concerns have been raised about the costs to businesses. So perhaps you're an employer. How do you feel about this? Or maybe you're somebody who's been ill when you were supposed to be on holiday. Would you expect to get the time back, or would you just take it on the chin and say that's life? You can tell us what you think by calling 0500 288 291 or emailing vine@bbc.co.uk. I'm joined now by Jeremy Baker, the affiliate professor at ESCP Europe Business School, who thinks this is very unfair on employers, and John Rees, socialist writer from Counterfire magazine, who says that if you're ill when you're on holiday, of course you should get the time back. So, John, just make the case for us, can you?
Well, business can afford it. Average profits in this country have been rising since 1975. In the last 2 years, real wages have been declining for only the second time since the Second World War. And UK workers work the second longest hours in Europe. So there's got to be a bit of give and take here. Of course, if you've just had 2 weeks holiday and perhaps like me earlier this year, you had the very vicious form of flu that was going around. You were knocked out for 10 days of that. Any sensible employer actually would say, OK, we don't want people who are exhausted, ill, tired, unable to work properly. We want people who are paid well, work reasonable hours, and can take holidays that they're legally entitled to have.
That's a very good example, Jeremy, isn't it? 2 weeks holiday and 10 days knocked out by a vicious flu.
But that's life, though. Let's say John Rees goes on a wonderful holiday and he really has a terrific time. Will he, in all honesty, go back to the employer and say, look, I'm due another 14 days holiday. This was so wonderful. Please give me, let's make it 12. I don't think John has ever done that. Come on, be honest, John. You've never, ever done that. And so that's the logic of life's up and down. Because when life's down...
Sorry, I was going to just take out the meaning from what Jeremy says, because what I think he's saying here is that if your argument is that if your holiday's destroyed, you don't get any rest, so your employer should give you some extra rest... By extension, if you have an extra restful holiday, you should ask your employer to cancel your other holiday.
Yeah, well, I think the trouble here would be everybody knows what it means to lose your holiday because you're ill. It would be very difficult to make the evaluation that Jeremy's suggesting here that I have a super good holiday.
That's true.
Kind of difficult. For instance, this will not be acceptable unless you have a doctor's note, as you do when you're off ill from work, proving that you've actually been ill. Now, if you can give me a doctor that'll give me a note saying he's in absolutely super good health because he's had an excellent holiday, perhaps we'll discuss it. But until then, the example that he gives is irrelevant to this discussion.
And Jeremy, in the end, you're going to have unhappy employees if they go on holiday and they're ill and they lose their holidays.
When they go on holiday, they plan to have a nice holiday, and that's part of the kind of skill of life. Have a terrific holiday. The thing for me is
part of the difficulty of life is that you can't plan to be ill. Of course, if we could plan to be ill like we plan to have a holiday, perhaps we'd all plan to do it while we were working, but it doesn't work that
Let me
way.
just ask, is John Rees part of the Greek, Spanish, Italian mafia who want to get the Germans to pay for everything? Because what he hasn't mentioned is he hasn't mentioned who is going to pay for this.
Jeremy, you should know that the Greeks actually work the longest hours in Europe. Those are the statistics. Now, if you're a professor, get on top of your facts.
No, John, if you know the facts, how much do they owe? How much do they owe? Just let's get that straight. How much do they owe, and who do they want to pay? They want the Germans to pay. So imagine a British employer starting in October. Someone comes along and says, look, I need an extra 2 weeks of holiday because I broke my leg skiing, which is fair enough, according to this new ruling. Who is going to pay for the loss of output? Are you going to go down to the German embassy and say, look, Angela Merkel, would you mind paying?
Well, leave aside Germany, because obviously then they're not going to pay for it happening in this country. John, you think it should be paid for out of profits for the company, yeah?
Well, there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the poor and the working population to the corporate sector in the course of the last 25 years. This has got to stop. We're only talking about, by the way, the people who are the figures I gave, for instance, are only for the people who are in full-time employment. If we were to include in that the now massive section of the workforce, which is in casualised, insecure, 0 hours contracts, this would look much, much worse. The balance between capital and labour is moving in the wrong direction, and it's not even leading to growth in other countries where it hasn't swung so severely against working people, like the German economy, economy, where they work less hours than we do each year, they've actually got a stronger economy.
Jeremy, is it your contention that this will get abused? And if so, do we know that it's being abused at the moment? Because my understanding is that in a lot of public sector jobs, including, I gather, the BBC, this rule is in place already.
Oh, it's awful. I think the whole entitlement culture is just it's destroying Britain and it's destroying Europe. So if you want a job, just to kind of somebody out there looking for a job, this is just not the attitude to take. You want to contribute, you want to sell more things or produce more stuff, and then you will get the job. To walk into the job with this entitlement attitude, the chip on the shoulder, this really is the wrong approach.
John, if you're talking about somebody young here who wants to get a job, and we know the jobs market is so tough for new graduates, they would want to schedule, if they could, all their illnesses to happen in their holidays, wouldn't they? Because then they'd be more productive at work.
Well, you can't schedule an illness.
But if they could choose,
that's the point. Well, maybe they would, but how disastrous an attitude is that? That you are so desperate for a job that you would ruin your own health, carry on working afterwards, exhausted, because that's what's demanded by an economy where you can't get a reasonable job.
John.
There's something wrong with that. And when we talk about entitlement culture, I'm all against the entitlement culture. I'm against the entitlement culture, which thinks that if you ruin an economy, you're still worth huge bonuses, you're still paying your shareholders, you're still paying making massive profits out of the people who do the work. That's the entitlement culture we've got to end.
Jeremy Baker.
No, what I think is Europe is in debt. Other people out in China and India and Brazil are working. They don't have this entitlement culture. They are taking the jobs. They are in charge. The logic of John Rees's position is go out and learn Chinese. They're going to be bossing us around. They're the ones who are running the economy. Okay, fun. But let John Rees, you explain where the next Chinese class is taking place, and then we'll all have to go there to learn Chinese.
Thank you very much, Jeremy Baker, affiliate professor of ESCP Europe Business School, and John Rees, socialist writer for Counterfire magazine. We are talking about the idea, well, it's more than an idea, it's going to be a law now, that if you fall ill during your holiday, your boss has to count that as